Good afternoon. I'm really excited to welcome you to the last webinar, the last Unbound webinar for the year, which I can't quite believe. If you live in Victoria like I do, you're probably wondering where summer is, given that it's supposed to arrive on Monday. I know I am. But we really are here at the end of the year. I hope you're doing okay. I am hearing a lot of struggles this week from my clients, but also even just in my personal relationships. This can be a very strange time of year. Some people love it, some people thrive. It can make people reflective. People can look back, look forward, look at decisions they're making. And of course, it can be bloody tiring and stressful and expensive. So I'm really conscious that it is taxing in different ways, and I hope that you're taking excellent care of yourself. Today's webinar is a Q&A, which I did a few months ago, and I loved it so much, and I had some questions left, plus I got some more, so I wanted to do it again. And it's a real mixed bag today, so I'm just going to get into it and get through as many as I possibly can. I think I'm going to get through most of these. I might not be able to go as deep as I would like, but I'm going to do my very best. So I guess I'm just having a look at my list of questions. A lot of questions this time about like relationships. So things happening in relationships, connection, conflict, attachment, that kind of stuff. So that's probably what we're going to get into a bit of today. So one of the questions I got was about conflict, which is how do I know when conflict is about growth building versus it's doing me harm and it's a sign to walk away, right? And this is a great question and I just want to kind of say why I love this question so much. I feel like conflict is one of those core relationship skills that it is such a shame we are not taught, because conflict is a really natural and, in my opinion, welcome part of a relationship. I have questions if someone says to me that they don't have conflict, right? Like, I guess it makes me wonder what people mean when they think of conflict. Maybe they've had some modeling around conflict that's really aggressive, violent, harmful, but actually, conflict signals two people are still independent beings with different perspectives, worldviews, values, and opinions. And they should, and often do bump up against each other and create points of conflict. The other thing I want to highlight here is that most conflict is unsolvable. The research from the Gottmans tells us that somewhere in the vicinity of close to 70% of conflict is what we call perpetual and unsolvable. Now, what this means is that the source of the conflict comes down to things like fundamental kind of personality differences or historical stuff or unchangeable lifestyle differences. So, I think about things like an age gap causing a conflict. You can't change the age gap, or a relationship that for now has to be long distance and causes a lot of conflict. So there are things that happen in our relationship that are unsolvable. And as I said, some of them come down to just differences of personality and character traits and all these kinds of things. So I hope that helps you kind of thinking about the fact that conflict is to be expected and, in my opinion, embraced. And our job isn't to solve all our conflicts. Our job is to get really good at having effective conflict. So this question, like when is conflict kind of building growth and when is it actually just doing harm, is a lovely one. Conflict becomes harmful when we are making ourselves smaller. So if people are walking on eggshells, letting things go in unsaid and feeling in any way unsafe, that is harmful. So, what we're looking for here, green flags in conflict, are feeling safe to express oneself, feeling sure that time will be spent in my experience. So, if I am spending time validating my partner and spending time in their experience, I am trusting that time will also be spent in my experience, and I feel confident that that will happen. So that is a green flag in conflict. Another green flag is, of course, it goes without saying, all the safety behaviors. So we're talking, obviously, the absence of any violence or harm, but we're also talking about things like regulation. So I'm looking for regulation during conflict, but I'm also looking for those sort of emotional and psychological safety signals as well. So, for example, couples who have conflict while still keeping in mind their body language, maybe even still touching each other lovingly, even if they're feeling very angry at each other. These kind of turning towards behaviors. Uh, they are the kinds of things we're looking for where conflict is building growth. The final thing I'll say, I could say lots on this, but I got to get through lots of questions. The final thing I'll say in this is a nice goal to hold for conflict, given that I've said most conflict is unsolvable, a nice goal to hold is, did the way we had that conflict deepen my understanding of you? Do we feel like we deepened our understanding of each other? If you can hold that as your goal, I think that will serve you well. So that's a little bit about conflict. Another question I've got here: how do I communicate about my mental health without feeling like a burden to my partner? Now, I have like a lot of thoughts on this. Uh, I'm just trying to make a decision about where to go with my answer. I guess a couple of things that I want to highlight is that when our mental health is in not a good place, it's really important to acknowledge what other skills might also be impaired, like our ability to regulate our emotions, maybe some executive functioning stuff. So, my ability to kind of problem solve or think logically or communicate effectively. Like, I'm really conscious of holding in mind, oh, and my judgment, like, my judgment might be off the way I interpret things. So, when our mental health is suffering, it can make all of these conversations harder. So, I just want to hold the space for that. This idea of feeling like a burden is something that's coming up a lot for me lately with clients, which I'm really interested in. People feel burdened if something is being asked from them for them, if something has been asked of them that they don't want to give. People also feel burdened if they're not clear on how to be helpful. Otherwise, people actually quite like to be helped. People feel honored when someone comes to them for support. So, the reframe I want to make here for you is that you aren't burdening your partner if you are communicating clearly, if you are considering their experience, and if you are being very clear with how they can support you. Your partner may feel burdened and may express that through frustration or irritation if they're not sure what you're wanting or how they can best support. And we don't like feeling like we can't support someone we care about. No one likes that if we're feeling unsure how to do that. So give your partner exactly what you need. Tell them exactly what you need from them. The final thing that I think can be helpful here is to let them know how hard, sorry, let them know how things are going for you and what steps you are taking. I think giving your partner visibility of your own efforts can be really helpful. It's really validating for everyone involved, for people to understand the effort that you are doing to care for yourself. Oh, I want to make one more point, which is that you're allowed to use your village here. No one needs to be your one source of support. So you might have a view, and this is something for you to interrogate yourself. You might have a view that your partner should be your number one support, the person you tell everything to, the person who knows it all, the person you go to for everything. But I want to kind of challenge that. I think that there's a lot to be said for the fact that our partner doesn't have to be all things, and you're allowed to also seek support elsewhere. And if there is a day that is feeling particularly tough, and you go to a friend or a family member instead and bring something different to your partner, that's okay too. So there's a few different pieces to this, but this word burden, I want to reframe it as, actually most people experience it as an honor to help somebody that they care about. They just need to know exactly what would be helpful. Uh, okay. I got a question about like independence. So it was basically, how can I tell the difference between enjoying personal space and enjoying alone time and avoiding intimacy? And this question came in the context of a conversation I was having about avoidant attachment styles, right? I firmly believe, and not just I believe, this is what avoidant means by definition. People with avoidant tendencies still want intimacy and closeness and connection as much as anyone. They just go about it differently. And this is also true when it comes to people who need more or less time to themselves. Generally speaking, people want to be connected to their partner if they are in happy and loving relationships. They might just go about it in different ways. And when somebody needs like a time of my brain's not working today. When somebody needs some alone time and maybe they need more than their partner, it can be a source of tension because this person over here who maybe doesn't need it as much can experience it as a source of um, abandonment or rejection, a moving away. And actually, what can be helpful to understand is someone who spends time on their own, exploring their own interests, enjoying their own company. It's actually a connective move for them. They do that, they fill up their cup, and they can come back and bring more to the relationship. Spending that time apart moves me closer to you. This can be hard for the other person to understand if what makes them feel closer is time together. So, time together makes me feel closer to you, and this person says, I need some time apart. So when we're back together, I can be available to be really close to you. That would be the answer to your question that I would give around how can I tell the difference between needing personal space and avoiding intimacy. Does that personal space and time on your own bring you back closer together? Do you find yourself wanting to be back together, missing, feeling recharged? Or is there a sense of dread and avoidance in coming back together? That's what I'd be looking for as the function of that alone time. Uh, okay. Someone came to me with this focus on this word safety, and I know I'm as guilty as anyone for using it. They were asking what actually is emotional safety in a relationship and how do you get it, right? So I kind of have answered some of that in the question earlier about conflict. Emotional safety looks like, do I feel free to be my full self, even with the volume dialed up? And trust that the connection is maintained. This isn't about someone will never be displeased with me, or I won't annoy anyone, or we won't have conflict, or we won't have doubts. But it's just trusting in the connection and trusting that I'll be okay. Whatever happens, I'm okay. So emotional safety is about I'm okay on my own and we're okay together. And as I said before, there's red flags to watch out for. Lacking emotional safety are those things like minimizing myself. Am I not asking for what I want? Am I turning my volume down? Am I walking on eggshells? Minimizing my needs, deprioritizing my needs, that kind of thing. So, emotional safety, the second part of your question was how do we build it together? Emotional safety is built in repair. So, conflict is totally fine. What matters way more and what's a much bigger predictor of relationship success is how do we repair after periods of conflict or disconnect? That is a big part of emotional safety. The other part of emotional safety is this full celebration of each other, even with the volume turned up. So, even when we are our most tired, angry, loud, wired, anxious, nervous, whatever it is, even with my volume fully turned up, like this person still accepts me and wants me and loves me. So there is that. Um, Something really practical, though, that I wanted to kind of give you with around emotional safety is this idea I mentioned before about deepening our understanding of each other. And a really like crucial, non-negotiable part of doing that is through vulnerability. So practicing being in each other's vulnerability is my number one tip about building emotional safety. If I can say the most vulnerable thing to my partner, show them the parts of myself that I dislike the most, that I feel the most shame about, that I'm the most embarrassed about, that I hate talking about the most, if I can show those parts of myself and be met with warmth, acceptance, compassion, understanding, and validation, my nervous system learns this is really safe. Another nice way to practice building emotional safety in earlier stages of the relationship is practice saying no. Practice disagreeing, practice having an opinion, and see what happens. An emotionally safe relationship is one that can tolerate disappointment, no's, turn downs, rejections, disagreements, differences of opinion, and still be okay. So that's something I've even practiced when I was dating. I would practice early on in the dating experience. I would practice, I'm not going to say test someone, but I would see what happened if I said no, if I disagreed, if I asked for something different. I would just see what happened. This is how we build emotional safety. I want to kind of comment though, your question was around, this person's question was like, how do we build it together? And I do want to kind of emphasize this work can't be done if only one person is doing the work. It simply cannot. And I work sometimes with people, I sometimes do relationship therapy and see couples, but most of my work is with individuals. And I am always so cognizant of that, that I can be talking to an individual about practicing more vulnerability in their relationship, but it will only go so far. Depending on the response from the other person. The other person has to really also value that and want that. And this is something I encourage people to actually talk about quite overtly. Like there are things that are going unsaid in our relationship because I feel embarrassed, or I find it catches in my throat and I hold myself back, or I feel concerned that I'm asking too much, I'm going to annoy you, or that you're going to say no and I'm not going to cope. Like whatever it is, it's getting stuck, but I want to practice it. And this is why. Your why might be because I want us to be closer. I want us to be more authentic. I want us to be more connected, whatever it is. I want to practice that. And I wondered if this was important to you too. Like, do you want to practice this too? Do you think this would make us feel more connected? Would you like that? So that's kind of what we're looking for here. This needs to be like collaborative to really work. Uh, Okay, I got another question here about relationships. Can it work if we love each other but have totally different attachment styles and emotional needs? This is a really easy one. The answer is absolutely yes. And in fact, I don't actually come across many couples who have perfectly matched emotional needs or attachment styles. That just simply does not exist, right? That's not to say everyone is at the extreme opposite end, like the most attached, anxious come to the most avoidant, but we all have different experiences, upbringings, developmental impacts, attachment experiences, emotional preferences, things we value in a relationship. We all have these differences. So, your question about can this work? The answer is like yes, and more often than not, that is how relationships work. This will always come down to communication. The bit that I was talking about earlier about do you let things go unsaid? Do you turn your volume down? Is is going to be a real barrier here. If things are not kind of openly talked about and people aren't asking for what they need, this is where resentment builds. It's also where assumption lives, and assumption is really dangerous. The assumption that my partner might be a mind reader if we've been together for X amount of years, or, this is what my partner used to like, so they still like it. Those kinds of things can be really damaging. They can really create these if we really miss the mark with our partner on something, it can really create attachment wounds, which are those things that happen in relationship that continue to impact us and continue to show up in the relationship. So having different needs, having different preferences, is totally workable. The key is communication. And I want to share a little bit of an example here. Even in my own relationship, my partner and I have very different styles when it comes to kind of well, we have very different attachment styles, really. I can be a bit more avoidant, and he's quite securely attached, but in moments of conflict or tension, he might tend towards anxiety. My tendency is towards avoidance, which looks like, remember, I'm always emphasizing this, avoidant does not mean avoidant of connection. I want connection very much. Avoidant means avoidance of those big painful feelings. So in moments of emotion or tension, I am more likely to shut down and want to retreat. That might look like verbal retreat, emotional retreat. It might look like physical retreat, like I'm out, I'm going to another room or I'm going out. And I've worked really hard on keeping myself regulated during moments of tension so that I don't do that, or that I recognize it's starting to happen and I take a break. So, for example, one of my biggest warning signs that it's starting to happen is when I say during an emotional conversation, if I say something like, I've got nothing else to say, that can, on the surface, to someone who doesn't know me that well, look quite calm, but it's not calm, it's shut down. And I know that, and my partner knows that. So we know that's a bit of a cue for us that I need a break, right? Nothing good's going to happen after that. We're not going to have a productive conversation. There's absolutely no need there's no benefit in pushing through, even though he might be starting to get some anxiety and he might want to keep going. So, we've come up with a bit of a plan to manage that where we take a break for a certain amount of time and we'll stay physically close together and all of that kind of stuff. So the key here is communication. Part of that is, of course, self-awareness. And you can do this as a team. That example I just gave you, that when I say, I've got nothing else to say and it's actually a shutdown response. It was actually my partner who pointed out that one out to me. I wasn't aware of that on my own. He said, I noticed you do this and it looks really calm. It looks like maybe the conversation's over, but I'm worried it actually means something else. And the reason he noticed that was because we would recover from a conflict, but my recovery took ages. And it was because I was really just shut down during some of that recovery. I wasn't really present. So we would make up and he'd be fine and he'd be like, cuddles, we're fine, And I would take another sort of 48 hours to really feel okay again. So we've learned that it's really actually so important to take a break earlier in an emotional conversation so that I can engage in a more regulated way and we can do a proper, effective, have a proper, effective conversation and then have an effective repair. So the answer is yes, of course, yes. People will always love with wildly different perspectives, experiences, and preferences. And I hope they do. Like that's how we grow, right? We learn so much. Um, I got another question here about um, mental health, and this was about like how do you stay connected sexually when one of the partners are dealing with ongoing mental health issues? So like ongoing depression or anxiety or grief or stress. Like how do we stay sexually connected over a prolonged period of time? So a couple of things here. The definition of sexual connection might need to be expanded here. How you've come to understand it might shift. And actually, I kind of like to replace the word sexually connected with something a little bit more expansive and inclusive, like erotically connected or sensually connected. There's lots of room in that. So, for example, I think of eroticism as like aliveness. For me, I find the erotic in feeling excited or nervous or trying something new or going on an adventure or seeing my partner excited about something. So there's lots of room in there for activities that aren't necessarily explicitly sexual, right? And likewise, I mentioned there as an example, sensually connected. So I might not feel like if I'm in the midst of a depressive episode, I might not feel like sexual interaction, but sensually I might be able to come to the party. So sensual connection, might look like a shower together or more hugging or holding hands while we sit together. So this question of how do we stay connected sexually? I really encourage you to expand your definition. The other thing that I think can be helpful there is though the actual sexual menu that you're ordering from, that might also need to change. So someone who's dealing with one of those stresses might have less energy. They might be up for less vigorous sexual activity, less frequent sex. The sex might be better at a different time of day. They might be impacted by medication side effects. There's a whole host of things to consider there. So it sounds so obvious, but when we're in the midst of this stuff, it can be hard to see the forest for the trees. So even something like changing the time of day that you engage can make a massive difference here. So I really encourage you to think about a challenge like this expansively. And another question I got here was about this definition of good enough. I think I mentioned this maybe on socials a while ago. What does good enough sex actually mean, and who defined it? Like, this is such a great question. And this idea of good enough is also the good news I have for you, super broad. What it does encompass, though, that I really like to introduce to people is this idea of, well, firstly, I want to say, I might just pause there actually. What I want to say first about good enough sex is that let's be real, most of the sex that people are having is good enough sex. Most people are not having mind-blowing, crying, lasting for 5 hours, tantric, multiple orgasmic sex every single time they have sex. In fact, that's probably the minority. The majority of sex that people have is good, maybe even great, but it's good enough, right? And it still feels good. Like there's still plenty of pleasure. You feel connected enough as much as you want to. You have an orgasm if that's important to you. You do the things that you like you're able to access pleasure and it's good and you finish and you go, oh, that felt so good, right? That's good enough. Now, a couple of other things that I do want to say about good enough sex is that I don't want it to be misunderstood as like a pass on then trying new things and continually reviewing and talking about your sex life. Like, I don't want you to take from this, well, Laura said most people are just having good enough sex, so I'll just leave it as it is. Like, there's still lots of room for discovery and growth in that, and I want there to be. The other thing I would say about this is that this also makes room for the many different reasons people have sex. So when I ask people why they have sex with a partner, I get a lot of different reasons. I mean, some of the more common ones are pretty obvious in terms of like intimacy and connection and shared pleasure. But people also talk to me about a bunch of other stuff. They talk to me about, rupture repair and validation and self-esteem and body image and cultural pressures and all sorts of reasons, and I don't judge any of them. One of the ones that we don't talk about enough, in my opinion, is this idea of like maintenance sex, which is this idea that in a long-term relationship, we will sometimes have sex even though we could take it or leave it. We will sometimes have sex for maintenance reasons, like I'm not really that fussed, but my partner wants to, or it's been a while and I'm aware that I don't want us to slip into not doing it, so I'm going to do it. Now, I'm super careful with my language here. This does not mean it's unwanted, it's still wanted, but the reasons for it might sound and look a little different to what we sometimes typically think of. So, in a relationship, if you have sex that you could take or leave, but your partner really wants and you're happy enough to be there, that is maintenance sex. And if that's okay for you, that's okay. Like that really is. And more than okay, I actually think that's more common than people realize. I think that we haven't found great language to talk about this kind of sex yet, but I think it's really common. I think it's really common to also have sex for reasons that are not physical. So, sex that you could take or leave, you're not really feeling particularly aroused, particularly intimate, you don't have an orgasm, but it's relaxing, or it's nice to see your partner happy, or it makes you feel a bit closer to your partner, or it boosts your confidence in your relationship, or like whatever it is. I don't judge any of the reasons that people have partnered sex. We have sex for a myriad of different reasons, but really important to understand that most of the sex we are having is simply good enough. I still think that's pretty good. I think they're all my questions. I feel like I got through them in better time than I thought I was going to. They were excellent though, and I was really struck by how many of them were really about kind of relationship stuff. So that is on my mind for future content. I do have I've written a blog that I'm just finishing up, and it will go live in the members portal uh, maybe sort of mid-December, and it's really about kind of boundaries at this time of year, which I know is a hot topic, but I've really tried to bring something new and fresh to it in terms of reframing what boundaries are and how they're not about doing something to someone, right? Boundaries are not a punishment, but actually how they can foster greater connection. Boundaries show us and each other how we love and how to be loved, how to give and receive love. So that will come out in a little while, but yeah, all the questions today about relationships have really got me thinking about content for next year. As always, I welcome your feedback. Let me know if you want me to expand on any of these points. I'll do it in my stories on Instagram or write an email about it. If there's something that you wanted me to dive deeper on, just shoot me an email. I always love to hear from all of you. But in the meantime, have a wonderful, happy, healthy end of the year and start of the new year. I will be around and reach out anytime. Thanks, everyone. Bye for now.